Eva Mendez smiled for the camera while holding her coffee, and David lay dead in their bed at home. Everything she did that morning, from posting a fresh start selfie to getting a tattoo, was part of a plan she had rehearsed for months. A plan that would shock everyone who thought they knew her quiet, gentle life. Eva Mendez lived in a small, quiet Arizona town where the mornings smelled of warm pavement and coffee drifting from corner diners. She shared a simple beige house with David, her boyfriend of 3 years, a man who worked long shifts at the warehouse, leaving before sunrise and returning after dark with tired eyes. To the outside world, Eva's life was gentle and uneventful. She often shared photos of her garden, mugs of herbal tea, and sunsets that painted the sky in streaks of orange and lavender, smiling softly in each post. She joined neighbors on casual evening walks, waved at the mailman, and chatted briefly with the woman next door about recipes for banana bread. No one suspected that behind Eva's quiet smile, something had begun to change. Her mind, once filled with small plans for future vacations and simple grocery lists, now carried a different kind of list, one she kept locked in her memory and never wrote down. Months before, Eva had started to buy small things that seemed harmless on their own. A prepaid phone paid in cash from a gas station outside of town, a pack of latex gloves tucked away in a box under the sink, and an unmarked envelope where she kept small amounts of cash she quietly set aside from tips she earned at the diner she worked in on weekends. Each item was added quietly, hidden in spaces she knew David would never check. She moved around the house in silence during the day while David was at work, studying the layout of the security cameras they had installed after a minor break-in on their street. She learned how to unplug them from the small box in the bedroom without triggering any alarms, practicing it during thunderstorms when the lights flickered so David would not notice if the camera feed dropped for a minute. Eva's online search history began to change too. She moved carefully, using the phone she bought with cash to search for terms like how to clean up fingerprints and how fast does life insurance pay out. She was methodical, reading forums late at night, memorizing tips, then erasing the browser history each morning. There was no panic in her, no fear, only a cold curiosity and a sense of preparation that settled in her bones like the steady ticking of a clock. She still kissed David's cheek when he left for work, still washed the dishes while watching birds outside the window, but inside, she was learning how to become invisible in her own life, planning a quiet end while giving nothing away. Eva made it a point to act normal around her friends, meeting them for coffee and laughing when they teased her about how organized she was with her budgeting apps and meal plans. She joined them at yard sales on weekends, picking up second-hand books while they looked for clothes, blending in with their small-town routines. At night, she would lay next to David, listening to his breathing, her eyes open in the dark as she rehearsed in her mind every step she would take. When the time finally arrived, there was no rush for her. She wanted everything to align perfectly, from the timing of her movements to the small details of the story she would tell. To Eva, it was never about anger or sudden emotion. It was about control, about taking back a life she felt she had wasted in quiet waiting. She was building her own quiet storm, and every sunrise that passed was just another day closer to the morning she would finally set her plan in motion. Eva woke early each day, moving around the small kitchen in silence, while David was still asleep, making coffee and opening the blinds to let in the soft glow of the morning sun. She had begun to clean the house with careful attention, scrubbing baseboards and wiping down doorknobs, not out of a desire for tidiness, but because she wanted to erase any fingerprints she might leave behind. She washed all the bedding twice in 1 week, folding the sheets so precisely that the edges align like pressed pages in a book. Each step was part of a larger plan she had memorized, a plan that was becoming a rhythm in her body, like a song she played over and over in her head. She started cooking David's favorite meals, making chicken with lemon and herbs, pasta with garlic bread, serving him with a soft smile as if she were simply caring for him. She did not feel guilty when she watched him eat, did not flinch when he looked at her with tired, trusting eyes. Instead, she carefully watched how he sat, how long he stayed awake on the couch, how often he checked his phone before going to bed. She made mental notes of his habits, the time he usually fell asleep, the time he was in his deepest sleep. She wanted to be sure there would be no chance of him waking up when she finally decided to end it. She wanted silence, and she wanted it clean. During the day, Eva called the tattoo shop she had found online, a small place on the edge of town that opened early and accepted walk-ins for small designs. She used a fake name and asked about booking a slot for the morning after the day she planned to act. The artist was polite, telling her she could come in as soon as they opened. Eva ended the call with a polite thank you, marking the time in a small notebook she kept in her purse for budget notes. She had already chosen a small feather for the tattoo, telling herself it would be a symbol of freedom when everything was over. A reminder of how she would no longer be tied to a life she did not want. Eva also checked the mailbox carefully each day, waiting for the final confirmation papers for the life insurance policy she had signed without David knowing. She used his information and forged his signature, setting herself as the beneficiary, claiming it was a joint policy for emergencies if anyone ever asked. But no one ever did. And David never noticed the mail Eva tucked away under old bills and flyers before he got home from work. She studied the fine print, memorizing the details of how the payout would work, learning which documents she would need to claim it after his death. There was a quiet satisfaction in how it all aligned, how her steps were small but steady, each detail fitting perfectly into the next. At night, she set her alarm for 2:00 a.m., turning the volume down low so it would only vibrate against the nightstand. She practiced waking up to it, getting out of bed silently, standing in the dark room while David's breathing filled the quiet air. She even rehearsed moving to the kitchen without making the floor creak, holding her breath as she stood in front of the drawer where she kept the knife she would use, telling herself to stay calm. When she returned to bed, she would close her eyes and feel her heartbeat slow again, drifting off to sleep with the plan replaying in her mind. There was no rush, only preparation, as she made sure every piece was ready for the moment when she would take back her life with quiet hands and a steady breath, a moment she had decided would come very soon. The night was quiet, and the only sounds in the house were the soft hum of the refrigerator and the slow, even breaths of David sleeping on the bed. Eva's alarm vibrated at exactly 2:00 a.m., and she opened her eyes immediately, fully awake. Her mind clear, she lay there for a moment, listening, letting the fear slip away like water draining from a sink. Slowly, she pushed the blanket aside and placed her bare feet on the cool floor, waiting again to ensure David's breathing remained steady. She moved carefully across the room, avoiding the spot near the door that creaked under pressure, and paused to glance back at him, lying there, unaware of how close he was to the end. In the kitchen, the air felt colder. Eva opened the drawer quietly and took out the small, sharp knife she had cleaned and hidden under old tea towels days before. She held it in her hand, weighing it, letting the cold steel touch her skin so she could ground herself in what she was about to do. Her breathing was calm, and there was no hesitation as she checked her reflection in the dark window, seeing only the shape of her face, pale and expressionless. She had removed every possible trace of her presence over the past weeks, cleaning surfaces and scrubbing corners, ensuring no hair strands or fingerprints would remain to contradict her plan. It was not rage that led her to this moment, but the cold understanding that her plan would only work if she stayed calm, methodical, and silent. She returned to the bedroom, moving like a shadow, holding the knife against her side to prevent any reflection from catching the light. David was still asleep, lying on his back, his mouth slightly open as he snored softly. She watched him for a moment, taking in the rise and fall of his chest, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the slight twitch in his fingers as he dreamed. She felt nothing, only a quiet certainty that this was her moment, the one she had rehearsed in her mind over and over, until the fear had worn away and only purpose remained. She stepped closer, placing her knee on the edge of the bed, to balance herself. With her free hand, she touched his shoulder gently, pressing down as she raised the knife with the other. She had memorized where to strike, just below the ribcage, angled upward, a place she had read would end everything quickly and quietly. She pressed the blade down firmly, feeling the resistance before it gave way, her hand steady even as the warmth spread across her skin. David's eyes opened for only a brief second, confusion and shock flashing before they went empty, his last breath catching in his throat. Before the room fell silent again, Eva held her breath, counting in her mind as she watched his chest, ensuring there was no movement, no gasp that would bring him back. The silence felt heavy, pressing against her ears, but she stayed there, waiting until she was certain it was over. She then stepped back, careful not to let the knife touch anything else, and moved to the bathroom to wash her hands, scrubbing under her nails, wiping the blade clean, before wrapping it in a plastic bag she had prepared earlier. She changed out of her clothes, folding them neatly and placing them into another plastic bag, sealing it tightly. She opened the window to let the air move through the room, clearing the scent of blood as she moved calmly, wiping down surfaces. With the gloves still on her hands, she placed her clean clothes on her body like armor, tying her hair back, checking her reflection one last time to ensure nothing was out of place. She took the 2 plastic bags, placing them in the trunk of her car, and locked the house behind her without looking back. The sky was still dark as she drove away, her hand steady on the wheel, the road empty as she moved toward the small tattoo shop that would open in a few hours, the place where she would leave the last piece of herself behind as she stepped into her new life. The silence of the night still inside her, the final part of her plan complete. The streets were empty as Eva drove, the sky just beginning to lighten in a dull gray before dawn, casting long shadows across silent houses. She felt the gentle hum of the engine beneath her as she kept her eyes fixed on the road, her hands steady on the steering wheel. There was no trembling in her fingers, no panic in her chest, only a strange calm that felt almost like relief. She had waited for this morning, planned every breath she would take, every step she would walk, and now it was unfolding exactly as she had rehearsed in her mind during countless quiet nights while David slept beside her. She arrived outside the tattoo shop 15 minutes before it opened, parking a few spaces down so she would not draw attention. She checked her reflection in the mirror, looking at her pale face, her eyes steady and focused. She smoothed her hair back, wiped away a smudge of dried blood she had missed along the edge of her nail, and applied a thin layer of lip balm as if it were any other morning. She reached into her bag and pulled out the folded paper with the feather design she had chosen, looking at it for a moment. It was small, simple, a single black feather with clean lines. To her, it was a promise, a quiet mark that would remind her she was free, that she had done what needed to be done, and there was no going back. When the lights inside the shop finally flicked on, Eva stepped out of her car and walked toward the door, feeling the cool air against her skin, the world waking up around her while she felt entirely disconnected from it. The artist greeted her with a tired but polite smile, unlocking the door and letting her in. The shop smelled faintly of disinfectant and ink, the walls decorated with sheets of flash designs and photos of finished tattoos. Eva handed over the paper with the feather, telling the artist she wanted it small, on the inside of her wrist, a simple black outline. She paid in cash, the same cash she had set aside from her diner tips over months, handing it over without a word as she sat in the chair, rolling up her sleeve. The artist prepared the machine while Eva rested her arm on the padded bench, her eyes watching the buzzing needle as it began to move, pressing into her skin with a sharp, burning sting that made her exhale softly, but did not break her composure. She watched as the ink filled the lines, the feather slowly appearing on her wrist, a dark, clean mark that felt like the closing of a chapter. She thought about how, at that exact moment, the neighbor would likely be finding David, how the police would soon arrive, how the questions would begin. She imagined them walking through the front door she had locked carefully behind her, stepping into the quiet house where everything was in place, the bed neatly made around him, the window open to let the morning air drift in. Eva kept her breathing steady as the artist wiped the excess ink, the small feather, now complete on her wrist, a permanent reminder of the moment her life changed. She thanked the artist calmly, pulling down her sleeve, hiding the fresh tattoo as she stepped out into the morning light. She took out her phone and snapped a photo of her wrist, the tattoo barely visible under the edge of her sweater, uploading it to her social media with the caption, "Fresh Start." She turned off the notifications immediately, sliding the phone into her pocket as she walked back to her car, her steps unhurried, her posture relaxed. She drove away from the tattoo shop without looking back, the morning sun rising fully now, casting gold across the streets. She stopped at a coffee shop drive-through on the edge of town, ordering a black coffee, the warmth of the cup grounding her as she parked in an empty lot, taking slow sips. Around her, the world felt normal, people rushing to work, parents dropping off children, and joggers running past with headphones in their ears. Eva sat quietly in her car, watching them, the soft throb of her fresh tattoo reminding her of what she had done, and what she had gained. She felt nothing except a calm certainty that she had finally taken control, that the plan she had created in silence had been completed in silence, and that the world would continue turning around her while she waited for the next step to arrive. The sun climbed higher, spilling sharp light across the beige siding of Eva's house as a neighbor, carrying a bag of groceries, noticed the front window was open, the curtain shifting in the breeze. The quiet felt wrong, pressing down on the small street, where sounds of morning usually drifted softly. When no one answered the door, the neighbor's curiosity shifted to concern, and a call was made. The local police arriving with quiet urgency, stepping carefully into the silent house. They found David lying on the bed, the sheets pulled neatly around him, the air in the room still cold from the open window. The scene was clean, with no signs of forced entry or disturbance, nothing out of place except the body lying there with the soft look of sleep still on his face. The police moved through the house, noting the organized kitchen, the spotless counters, the freshly vacuumed floors. It felt as if someone had prepared the space, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for this moment to be discovered. One officer stepped back outside to call for detectives, while another stood silently near the bed, looking at the way David's hands were positioned, how the wound had been precise, deliberate, leaving little mess behind. The calmness of the scene was unsettling, making them suspect immediately that this was not a crime of anger, not a moment of chaos, but something else. Something planned. As news spread through the street, neighbors gathered quietly behind fences, whispering in low voices, remembering Eva's calm smile, the way she tended her small garden, the way she walked to her car every morning without rushing. None of them could imagine her connected to the scene now unfolding inside the house. It was the police who began to connect the pieces. Finding the small insurance papers tucked away in a drawer, Eva's name listed as the sole beneficiary. They noted the recent internet router logs, the security cameras that had been disconnected during the night, leaving a gap in the footage that matched the estimated time of death. Meanwhile, Eva sat in her car in a parking lot across town, finishing her coffee, the sleeve of her sweater pushed up just enough to let her fingers trace over the fresh tattoo, the skin still warm and tender. She felt a lightness, a space inside her that had once been heavy now replaced with quiet relief. Her phone buzzed once, twice, as messages came in, but she did not check them, choosing instead to watch the way the morning light bounced off the windshield, how people moved around her with ordinary purpose, unaware of what had happened. Only hours before by the afternoon, detectives arrived at the coffee shop, where Eva sat alone, her eyes clear as they approached her. She did not run or protest as they spoke to her, explaining why she needed to come with them, their voices low and careful as they read her rights. She nodded, standing calmly, sliding her phone into her pocket before placing her hands behind her back, the cool metal of the cuff snapping against her wrists, resting directly over the small feather she had chosen to mark her freedom. As they led her to the car, she glanced once at the sky, noting the way the clouds moved slowly, how nothing around her had changed, even though everything had changed for her. She did not cry or plead, did not ask what would happen next, because she already knew. It was all part of the plan she had created in silence, carried out with the same quiet she had used to live her daily life, the same quiet with which she now accepted the consequences. Everything had been planned, every detail placed exactly where it needed to be, and Eva, with her calm steps and careful eyes, had already accepted the truth that she had made for herself, a truth that was now unchangeable.